When a young boy ran up to his school's janitor, pleading for him to let him stay overnight at the school, the janitor initially passed it off as an emotional young child's imagination running wild. However, after he saw bruises on the boy's arm, and noticed his terrified demeanor, he realized something was deeply wrong. After alerting the boy's teacher, a race against time to save the boy from his abusive home began. This is a story of bravery, resilience, and the relentless fight for justice. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe the truth should always come to light, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Liam was only 11 years old when he first set foot inside Raven's Hollow Academy. His small stature and wide, apprehensive eyes blended into the crowd of students who bustled through the hallways. But there was something about him that felt different from the typical first-day jitters. Liam was quiet, almost too quiet for a child. He walked with a slight hunched posture, as though he expected a sudden voice to bark at him from behind. He spoke only when spoken to, and even then, his words were guarded, as though he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. He had entered Raven's Hollow Academy in the middle of the semester, a time when new admissions rarely occurred. Many of his classmates wondered if he had moved from another city, but whenever they asked him about it, Liam avoided their questions. He would nod politely or offer a soft, almost imperceptible smile, then lower his head, letting the conversation drift away. The students, for the most part, shrugged and left him to his quiet world. Yet there were a few who took notice of his timid demeanor and thought something might be amiss. Among them was Mr. Carter, a language arts teacher known for his supportive nature and dedication to helping students find their voices. He had once struggled through a rough patch in his own childhood, and the empathy he had developed from those experiences gave him a keen sense of when a child was truly hurting. On the day Liam arrived, Mr. Carter observed him from across the hall. He saw how Liam's eyes flickered nervously at every adult who walked by, and how he hesitated whenever someone asked the simplest question, as if each query was a trick meant to expose him. Mr. Carter mentioned his concerns to Ms. Jennings, who taught social studies and had a similarly caring disposition. Ms. Jennings was quick to note that while Liam did participate quietly in class, he never volunteered answers, never raised his hand, and never looked entirely comfortable in his seat. "He's not just shy," Ms. Jennings said one afternoon. "There's a heaviness to him. He's always so guarded." Although they both picked up on these signals, either had enough concrete evidence to suspect that Liam was in danger. He had no record of skipping school, and his guardians, Daniel and Victoria Hargrove, had filled out the necessary paperwork with everything in order. The contact information was valid, and there was an emergency number that reached a voice mailbox identifying them by name. Nothing on the surface seemed problematic enough for Child Protective Services to intervene. Still, the nagging feeling lingered for both teachers. Over the weeks, they tried to engage Liam, offering help with homework, or simply asking how he was settling in. Liam's answers were brief and uninformative, though always polite. Mr. Whitaker, the school janitor, was a fixture in the hallways of Raven's Hollow Academy. He was a friendly man in his late 50s, with a slight stoop in his shoulders and a kindly face that had witnessed decades of children growing up under the same roof. He prided himself on being observant, and he had seen many students walk those halls, children excited, children anxious, children rebellious, and children burdened by the weight of the world. There was something in Liam's demeanor that caught his attention from the start. The way Liam's eyes darted nervously whenever Mr. Whitaker appeared around a corner reminded him of a startled animal wary of an approaching predator. It was on a chilly autumn afternoon, not quite winter but cold enough that scarves and gloves were emerging from closets, when Mr. Whitaker made a discovery that set the entire story into motion. He was making his usual rounds, ensuring all the doors and windows were locked. Dusk was settling, the sky outside bruised purple and orange, and the corridors were mostly empty. Only a few teachers stayed late for extracurricular activities. As Mr. Whitaker walked along the hallway near the library, he thought he heard a soft sniffle echo in the stillness. He followed the sound to a small nook, a corner where trophy cases displayed the school's achievements in sports and academics. There, curled up on a bench, was Liam. The boy had his face hidden behind his arms, and his shoulders trembled as though he was trying hard not to cry. Mr. Whitaker stopped in his tracks, alarmed by the sight. He had never seen Liam after hours. Normally, the children were all gone by now, busing home or getting picked up by guardians. Carefully, he approached. "Hey there," Mr. Whitaker said gently. He tried not to startle the boy, keeping his voice calm and slow. "What's wrong, son? Did you miss your bus?" Liam lifted his head. His eyes were red, and he looked utterly defeated. "Please," he whispered. "Can I stay here tonight?" The words came out in a trembling plea. Mr. Whitaker was taken aback. He had expected something like a missed ride or lost keys, but not an overnight stay request. He offered a kind smile, though inside his heart quickened. "Why would you need to stay at the school, Liam? Don't you have someone waiting at home?" Liam hesitated, glancing away as if he was ashamed to speak. Finally, in a voice so quiet it was almost inaudible, he said, "I just can't go back. Please don't make me go back." At first, Mr. Whitaker chalked it up to a child's overactive imagination or a tantrum. Children sometimes tried to exaggerate their woes, especially if they were unhappy about chores or punishments at home. Yet something about Liam's face was haunting. There was desperation shining through his eyes. Mr. Whitaker reached out to place a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder, and that was when he noticed the bruise. It was a purplish mark near the boy's forearm, partly hidden by his shirt sleeve. Liam flinched at the touch, as if he expected a blow to follow any contact. Alarm coursed through Mr. Whitaker. He knelt in front of Liam, voice trembling slightly. "Liam, where did you get this bruise? Did you fall somewhere?" Liam's gaze darted around nervously. It's nothing," he mumbled, clearly lying. Mr. Whitaker felt an uncomfortable chill run down his spine. He had been in the school system long enough to know the difference between an accidental bruise from roughhousing on the playground and something more sinister. The shape and discoloration looked more consistent with a gripping hand than a scrape or bump. He gently took Liam's hand and helped him stand up. "All right," he said carefully, trying to maintain composure. "Let's go find Mr. Carter or Ms. Jennings. We'll figure out what to do, okay?" Liam allowed himself to be guided, his shoulders slack with resignation. Every step he took seemed weighed down by dread. Mr. Whitaker led him to the teacher's lounge, where Ms. Jennings and Mr. Carter were often the last ones out. Sure enough, Ms. Jennings was inside, reviewing some assignments on her laptop. She looked up, startled to see Mr. Whitaker entering with Liam so late. "What's going on?" she asked, setting her work aside. Concern lit up her features the moment she took in Liam's pallor and Mr. Whitaker's anxious expression. "He wants to stay overnight," Mr. Whitaker explained. "He said he can't go home." Ms. Jennings's eyes flicked to Liam. "Why not, sweetie? Are your parents out of town?" Liam squeezed his hands together. His voice was barely above a whisper. I can't go back there." It was clear from the tremor in his words that something beyond normal family conflict was at play. Ms. Jennings signaled for Liam to sit on a nearby chair. She crouched beside him, trying to look him in the eyes, but he kept his gaze fixed on the floor. Her voice was gentle. "Liam, if something is wrong at home, you have to tell us. We can't help if we don't know." Mr. Carter happened to enter the lounge just then, a folder of student essays under his arm. The moment he saw the gravity in Ms. Jennings's face, he set his paperwork down. "What's going on?" he asked, and Ms. Jennings updated him quietly on the situation. Mr. Carter looked at Liam with deep concern. "I've noticed you've been tense, Liam. Are you afraid of your foster parents?" The mention of foster sent a jolt of awareness through Mr. Whitaker. He had almost forgotten that Liam was not living with his biological family. The boy gulped, still silent, his fists clenched in his lap. Mr. Carter gently reached out a hand. "It's okay, you can talk to us." Liam shook his head vigorously, tears threatening to spill. "I can't," he croaked. "They'll be angry if they find out." A hush fell over the room. Although none of them had a complete picture, the fear in Liam's eyes confirmed enough. No child should be that terrified of going home. Mr. Whitaker and Ms. Jennings exchanged glances, uncertain how to proceed, but Mr. Carter's expression hardened with resolve. He had been in a terrible foster situation as a teenager, though he rarely talked about it, and the memory now flared up with painful clarity. "It's all right," Mr. Carter said, doing his best to keep his voice calm. "We'll figure this out together, okay? Right now you're safe here. Nobody is going to force you back into anything you don't want." Relief flickered in Liam's eyes, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by anxiety about what would happen next. Ms. Jennings stood up, taking out her phone. "We should contact Ms. Rowe, the social worker who handles these cases for the school district." Mr. Carter nodded in agreement. "Yes. And we'll let the principal know in the morning." He turned to Mr. Whitaker. "Thank you for bringing him here." Mr. Whitaker merely nodded. "No problem. I'm just glad I found him." Thus began the series of events that would unravel the carefully concealed abuse in Liam's life. Over the next few hours, Ms. Rowe was notified and expressed immediate concern. She was well versed in the signals of child endangerment, having intervened in more than her fair share of similar cases. The moment she heard about the bruises and the boy's plea to stay at school, she arranged an immediate visit to the Hargrove household. That very evening, with permission from the necessary authorities, Ms. Rowe and a local child welfare representative drove to the address listed for Daniel and Victoria Hargrove. From the outside, it looked like a typical suburban home: manicured lawn, neat flower beds, and warm lights shining through the windows. Victoria answered the door, her face etched with polite confusion. Daniel stepped in from the living room, extending a courteous greeting. They offered Ms. Rowe and her associate a seat, served them tea, and inquired about the nature of their visit. "We received a report that Liam expressed fear about returning home," Ms. Rowe said carefully, observing both parents for reactions. "He said he wanted to stay overnight at school." Daniel let out a small chuckle, as though the notion was humorous. "He's an imaginative boy," he said. "He's been going through a phase recently, making up stories. We're trying to manage it." Victoria nodded in agreement, placing a hand on her husband's arm. "Yes, he's been going through emotional ups and downs lately. We think it might be from the trauma of being in the foster system. You know how children can be." Ms. Rowe's instincts prickled, though on the surface the couple seemed pleasant enough. Liam's body language made it clear that something was terribly wrong, but Ms. Rowe also had to follow legal protocols. She requested to see Liam's room and was shown a neat, sparse space with folded clothes and neatly stacked books on a desk. Everything looked orderly, and she noticed no immediate signs of violence or struggle. When she asked about the bruises, Daniel calmly explained that Liam was clumsy and often tripped or bumped into things without telling them. "It's not the first time he's had a bruise here or there," he said. "Boys will be boys." The conversation ended with Ms. Rowe and her associate leaving the house with a sense of unease. There was no direct evidence of abuse, yet she couldn't ignore the fear she had heard in Liam's voice when he asked to stay at school. Something more was happening there. It was a gut feeling she had learned to trust in her years of social work. But instincts alone weren't enough to remove a child from a home. They needed tangible proof, photographic evidence, medical reports, or the child's testimony. Liam's own words held power, but if he was too afraid to speak, it would complicate matters. Back at the school, Ms. Rowe relayed her concerns to Mr. Carter and Ms. Jennings. The staff agreed to keep a closer watch on Liam. They arranged discreet check-ins with him during lunch breaks and after school, trying to build trust so he might open up about his experiences. But Liam, terrified of retaliation from the Hargroves, remained guarded. He would lower his head, respond briefly, and try to steer the conversation away from his home life. Weeks passed. Bruises continued to appear, though the Hargroves seemed adept at dressing him in long sleeves or high collars that concealed most of the marks. Occasionally, Liam would slip up and roll a sleeve to scratch his arm, revealing a discolored patch. Each time, the teachers felt helpless. Without Liam's admission or more concrete evidence, official intervention was always precarious. Tension mounted one late afternoon when Ms. Jennings found Liam sitting alone in the library, hunched over a thick book about ancient mythology. She approached quietly and took a seat across from him. He looked up, startled, then noticed it was just Ms. Jennings. "Liam," she said softly, "are you all right? You've been so quiet today. More than usual, I mean." Liam shook his head, eyes darting away. "I'm fine," he whispered, though his expression said otherwise. "Would you like me to walk you to your bus?" Ms. Jennings asked, trying another angle. He hesitated. "I already missed the bus." "How come? Did you lose track of time reading?" Liam shrugged, then bit his lower lip. I just didn't want to go home yet." Ms. Jennings's heart twisted. "Listen, if something's happening, you can tell me. I promise you won't get into trouble." For a split second, Liam looked like he might speak, but he swallowed hard and stood up. "I have to go," he murmured. Without waiting for a response, he rushed out of the library, leaving Ms. Jennings with a heavy sense of sorrow. She watched him vanish down the hallway, feeling powerless. That night, Liam didn't return to the Hargroves until long after dark. Daniel was furious, pacing the living room with clenched fists, demanding to know where Liam had been. Victoria stood in the corner, her arms crossed, scowling at the boy. He tried to stammer out an explanation about missing his bus, but Daniel took hold of Liam's arm, pulling him roughly. Liam cried out, tears burning his cheeks, but that only seemed to enrage Daniel more. Victoria watched impassively, occasionally throwing in a few cold remarks about how Liam was ungrateful and costing them so much trouble. In the days that followed, the bruises became more pronounced, and Liam's face grew paler, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. Still, he said nothing, terrified of the consequences. It wasn't until Mr. Whitaker, while cleaning the halls late one evening, found Liam once again trembling in the shadows, that the severity of the situation escalated. This time, Liam's collarbone area was discolored, and he winced whenever he moved his arm. Mr. Whitaker didn't hesitate. He immediately took Liam to the main office where Ms. Jennings happened to be staying late for paperwork. They called Ms. Rowe, who arrived within the hour. Upon seeing the bruises near Liam's collarbone, Ms. Rowe took photos and escorted him to the hospital for an examination. Although the boy insisted he had fallen from a bike, the pattern of injuries suggested otherwise. Finally, faced with the physical evidence, Child Protective Services placed Liam in temporary protective custody. The Hargroves were informed, and they put on a performance of shock and concern, demanding to see their foster son. But the authorities decided that a thorough investigation was necessary before any reunion. Liam was moved to a shelter, a place with bunk beds and a rotation of staff. It wasn't a warm, comforting environment, but he was free from immediate harm. Yet the uncertainty weighed on him. He had no guarantee that the Hargroves wouldn't regain custody, no assurance that his future wouldn't involve another cycle of foster placements. The prospect terrified him. It was in that grim state of mind that Liam made the rash decision to run away from the shelter, believing that anywhere else might be safer. For 2 days he wandered the streets, sleeping in doorways, using whatever spare change he had to buy small amounts of food. On the second night, the temperature dropped drastically, and Liam found himself shivering against a wall in a deserted alley behind a row of shops. His breath came in foggy puffs. He feared the Hargroves might be searching for him, that the shelter staff were on the lookout, that no place was truly safe. Tears stung his eyes as he huddled against the cold brick, feeling utterly alone. Mr. Carter, by a stroke of fate, was driving home late from an evening class he taught at a local community center. It was by pure chance that he decided to cut through the back roads instead of his usual route. His headlights illuminated the small figure curled up on the ground. An alarm spiked in his chest when he realized it was a child. Pulling over, he recognized Liam immediately. "Oh my goodness, Liam!" Mr. Carter exclaimed, rushing over. "What are you doing out here?" He tried to help Liam stand, but the boy trembled uncontrollably. I can't go back," Liam mumbled, his teeth chattering. "No foster home wants me. The Hargroves will find me if I go back to the shelter. I can't. I just can't." Mr. Carter's voice was gentle but urgent. You're freezing. Let me take you somewhere safe. We can figure this out, all right? Liam hesitated, but the dire cold and the kindness in Mr. Carter's eyes persuaded him. Nodding weakly, he allowed himself to be guided into the warmth of the car. Mr. Carter called Ms. Rowe on the way, explaining the situation. By the time they reached the local social services office, Liam had lapsed into an uneasy silence, tears occasionally rolling down his cheeks. Mr. Carter stayed by his side, comforting him as best he could. When Ms. Rowe arrived, she was relieved to see Liam safe but concerned about how this incident would affect his future placements. She spent hours on the phone, making arrangements for a new foster placement, but the timing was complicated. Many families were already at capacity or unavailable for immediate care. Realizing the predicament, Mr. Carter stepped forward with a quiet resolution in his eyes. "I'll do it," he said. "Let me take him in, at least temporarily. He can stay with me until you find a permanent placement. I can't bear to see him bounced around again, not when he clearly needs stability." Ms. Rowe looked at Mr. Carter with a mixture of gratitude and caution. "Are you certain? Fostering a child is a big responsibility, and this case might become a legal quagmire." Mr. Carter nodded. "I understand the responsibility. But I can't stand by and watch this child suffer any longer." Thus, with the necessary emergency paperwork signed, Liam moved in with Mr. Carter. The teacher transformed his spare room into a comfortable space, complete with soft blankets, a little bookshelf, and a desk. Liam, still reeling from his experiences, found it hard to relax, but he took comfort in Mr. Carter's gentle presence. Over time, he began to trust the man who had offered him shelter and kindness without condition. However, the calm was short-lived. As investigations progressed against the Hargroves, the couple hired a lawyer and fought back aggressively. They accused Liam of lying, painting him as a troubled boy with a history of fabricating stories. Daniel and Victoria appeared well-spoken in court, providing forged documents and statements that cast doubt on Liam's allegations. More than once, Liam found himself trembling when asked to retell his story in front of a stern panel of adults. He would falter, his voice failing him under the weight of old fears, and each hesitation seemed to strengthen the Hargroves' defense. For a while, the legal tide seemed to be turning in the Hargroves' favor. They had resources, social connections, and a veneer of respectability that appealed to certain officials who were skeptical of Liam's accounts. The boy's reluctance to look anyone in the eye when testifying only fueled the narrative that he was being coached, or making things up. Mr. Carter and Ms. Jennings attended every hearing, offering moral support, while Ms. Rowe did her best to present the evidence she had gathered, the photos of bruises, the medical reports, and the statements from staff. Yet the system's bureaucratic complexities threatened to overshadow the simple truth that Liam was a victim. Inside the small apartment he shared with Mr. Carter, Liam began to show signs of ongoing anxiety and nightmares. He would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. On many such nights, Mr. Carter would calm him down with reassuring words, sometimes reading to him until he fell asleep again. The everyday routine of going to school, seeing teachers, and returning to Mr. Carter's home offered a semblance of normalcy, but the looming possibility of being sent back to the Hargroves hung over Liam like a dark cloud. One afternoon, Ms. Jennings stopped by Mr. Carter's apartment to drop off some lesson materials Liam had missed. She found Liam in the living room, hugging a pillow to his chest. She sat beside him and asked softly, "How are you holding up?" He shrugged, his voice small. "Sometimes I feel safe here, but then I remember the court hearings, and I get scared." She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I know it's scary. But remember, you have people who believe in you. Mr. Carter, me, Ms. Rowe, even Mr. Whitaker. You have allies." Liam nodded but remained silent. Despite the support, the specter of returning to the Hargroves loomed large. That fear continued to strangle his voice whenever he tried to speak up in a formal setting. As the trial progressed, the judge deemed Liam's testimony crucial. There was evidence pointing to abuse, but the defense countered each piece with explanations or expert witnesses who questioned the credibility of Liam's claims. The case became a spectacle, with the Hargroves maintaining their composure, wearing polite smiles in public, and delivering prepared statements about how they had taken Liam in out of the goodness of their hearts. The prosecution argued that the bruises and testimony from teachers were clear indicators of abuse. Tensions ran high, and it seemed the outcome could go either way. Finally, the turning point arrived on a day when the courtroom was filled with journalists, curious onlookers, and a handful of child advocates. Liam was called to the stand once more. He walked up timidly, his knees almost buckling. Mr. Carter gave him a silent nod of encouragement from the gallery. Ms. Jennings pressed her hands together, silently praying that he would find his voice. The Hargroves sat at their table, their expressions stern and unyielding, their lawyer ready to pounce on any perceived inconsistency in Liam's account. The judge addressed Liam gently, reminding him that he needed to tell the truth to the best of his ability. Liam clutched the edge of the wooden stand, looking down at his shoes. A hush fell over the room, the air thick with anticipation. After a few agonizing seconds, Liam inhaled shakily, tears already forming in his eyes. "They hurt me," he whispered. His voice trembled, but it carried through the tense silence. He glanced at Daniel and Victoria for the briefest moment, then returned his gaze to the floor. They would tell me I was worthless. They'd lock me in my room. If I did anything wrong, His voice quavered, and for a moment it seemed he might clam up. But then he saw Mr. Carter's gentle nod, and he forced himself to continue. "They said if I told anyone I was afraid. So I lied about the bruises. But they weren't accidents." With every halting word, Liam's voice strengthened a fraction. He detailed moments that left him bruised physically and emotionally, the nights he spent trembling, the threats he endured. His testimony, raw and honest, cut through the legal posturing that had muddied the waters for so long. By the time he was done, tears were streaming down his cheeks, and more than a few people in the courtroom dabbed at their own eyes, moved by the sight of this young boy opening himself up to such vulnerability. The Hargroves' lawyer tried to object, claiming that Liam was being manipulative or coached, but the damage was done. The sincerity in Liam's voice rang clear, and the judge took note. Within days, the case turned in favor of Liam. The Hargroves were convicted of child abuse, sentenced to probation with strict monitoring initially, though the severity of the penalty was still pending a final decision on whether they would serve time. Liam remained in Mr. Carter's care while the system sorted out the next steps. There was a collective sigh of relief among the teachers and staff at Ravens Hollow Academy, as well as Ms. Rowe, who had been pushing for justice all along. However, the sense of closure was short-lived. Liam remained skittish, plagued by nightmares. Mr. Carter often found him curled in a ball on the living room couch late at night, staring at the door as though expecting someone to barge in. "They won't give up," Liam would say, his voice tinged with an unshakable dread. Mr. Carter tried to reassure him, telling him that the Hargroves had been found guilty and would soon face further legal consequences. But Liam's intuition proved tragically prescient. 2.5 weeks later, just when life at Mr. Carter's apartment was beginning to feel a little more settled, a nightmare came true. The night was eerily quiet, the only sounds a faint breeze rustling the trees outside. Mr. Carter was asleep in his bedroom, and Liam had finally drifted off on his bed. The subtle creak of the front door was the only warning. Then, in the darkness of the living room, silhouettes appeared. The Hargroves had broken in, determined to reclaim Liam by force. The echoes of a forced lock and hushed, frantic footsteps punctured the silence. Liam awoke to Daniel's hand clamped over his mouth, Victoria standing behind him, warning him not to make a sound. Mr. Carter, alerted by a muffled cry, rushed out of his bedroom. He found Daniel dragging Liam toward the front door. A brief struggle ensued, but Daniel was physically stronger, and a swift blow knocked Mr. Carter to the floor. Liam tried to scream, but Victoria's hand tightened over his mouth. There was no mention of a weapon, but the pure menace in Daniel's voice as he hissed for Liam to comply was enough to paralyze the boy with fear. Carried away under cover of darkness, Liam could only tremble, tears burning his eyes. The Hargroves forced him into a car. For 4 days, they held him captive in a secluded location out of state. They forbade him from making any noise, scarcely allowed him food or water, and ranted about how they would fix this situation once and for all. Liam's heart hammered ceaselessly with terror, each hour blending into the next, his mind cycling between despair and the faint hope that someone, somewhere, would find him. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter, bruised and frantic, alerted the authorities the moment he regained consciousness. Ms. Rowe and the local police were on the scene within minutes of his call. While the local police force mobilized, federal authorities took an interest in the case because it involved an interstate kidnapping. Though no firearms were mentioned or discovered, it was a clear abduction. The FBI quickly got involved, launching a search for Liam across state lines. The entire staff at Ravens Hollow Academy waited in tense solidarity, the corridors filled with worried whispers about Liam's fate. On the 4th day, through a combination of phone tracing and a tip from a bystander who noticed a child matching Liam's description, the authorities tracked the Hargroves' car to a small house in a rundown area outside city limits. Swarms of law enforcement arrived, quietly surrounding the property to avoid tipping off the couple. In the final tense moments, Daniel threatened to use force against Liam, though he had no visible weapon. He gripped Liam by the collar, snarling that he would make everyone pay for taking him away. Agents negotiated from outside, urging him to surrender. The standoff escalated into a brief scuffle when Daniel tried to rush out a side door with Liam. An FBI agent tackled him, incapacitating him with a swift maneuver that left Daniel sprawled on the floor. Victoria was apprehended inside, screaming incoherently about how they had every right to reclaim their foster son. When it was over, Liam was shaking from head to toe, but he was physically unharmed. The trauma, however, settled deep. As the authorities led him to safety, he clung to the agent's coat, tears streaming. He was rushed to a hospital for a checkup and then finally reunited with Mr. Carter, who wrapped him in a blanket and held him. Liam collapsed into sobs, relieved to be alive and free but terrified at what he had just endured. The Hargroves were jailed immediately, their prior conviction for abuse combined with kidnapping charges guaranteeing a more serious sentence this time. No more manipulations, no more second chances. They faced the weight of the law, and the entire community, outraged by the brutality, ensured they would see the inside of a cell for a long time. In the aftermath, Liam returned to Mr. Carter's home, though it would take a long while before he truly felt safe enough to sleep through the night. The boy's teachers rallied around him, offering the love and support that had been so absent for most of his young life. Therapy sessions became a regular part of his routine, helping him process the nightmares and the ever-present anxiety that came from having been stolen away in the middle of the night. Gradually, the fog of fear began to lift. Little by little, Liam allowed himself to imagine a future free from the shadows that had haunted him. Mr. Carter, in turn, found his own life changed by Liam's presence. He discovered a sense of purpose and responsibility he hadn't fully experienced before. He was determined to give Liam the family he had never known. When legal proceedings finally ended, Mr. Carter formally adopted Liam, signing the paperwork that made them a permanent family. The day the judge declared the adoption final, Ms. Jennings and Ms. Rowe came to celebrate with balloons and a small cake in Mr. Carter's living room. Mr. Whitaker stopped by later, patting Liam on the shoulder with tears shining in his kind eyes. For the first time, Liam felt the warmth of a genuine family bond, one forged not by blood, but by compassion, shared struggles, and unwavering love. Although the scars of his past lingered, both physically and emotionally, Liam found hope blossoming within him. He began to participate in school activities. Mr. Carter noticed that he would raise his hand in class occasionally, offering answers in a timid voice. Ms. Jennings saw him play board games with classmates during recess, tentatively building friendships. The nightmares still visited, but they came less frequently, and each time, Mr. Carter was there to soothe him, reminding him he was no longer alone. 1 month after the harrowing kidnapping, the story drew to a quiet close when Liam and Mr. Carter shared a simple dinner together at home. The table was set with 2 plates, steaming bowls of soup, and a fresh loaf of bread. The air was calm, punctuated only by the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional rustle of the curtains. Liam looked across the table at Mr. Carter, thinking about how much had changed in a relatively short time. "Thank you," Liam said, his voice small but steady. Mr. Carter placed his spoon down. "For what?" he asked gently. Liam glanced around the small apartment, at the pictures they had started to pin on the walls, a few of Liam's drawings, a photo of them together at an ice cream parlor. "For everything," he said, taking a moment to breathe. "For making me feel safe." Mr. Carter's eyes grew misty. "You never have to thank me for that," he said. "That's what family is for." In that moment, Liam felt a genuine warmth spread through him, a feeling of belonging. The pain and fear of his past hadn't vanished entirely, but it was tempered by the realization that he had a true home and a future worth looking forward to. Liam and Mr. Carter finished their dinner in companionable silence, reflecting on the journey that had led them there. The trials and betrayals, the heartbreak and fear, all weighed heavily in the past. Yet in that modest dining room, with the overhead light casting a gentle glow, the promise of a new chapter beckoned. This chapter was defined not by cruelty or neglect, but by healing, understanding, and a love that neither of them had truly experienced before. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.